This same gang that made decisions that led to the needless loss of lives in Benghazi and a situation they lied about, the support for terrorists in Syria, the rise of ISIS. They're back at it in Afghanistan, and we're seeing the results. First up, obviously, is the terrible day for America that occurred with in my view, the foreseeable and needless loss of American lives due to a terror attack in Kabul at the airport. 13 Marines, I think 12 Marines and one Navy corpsman has been lost. Their lives have been lost, 15 injured. The number of Afghani civilians that have been lost is staggering. I think it's at 170 the last time I checked on the news. So this is a disaster, and it's all Joe Biden's fault. It's all President Biden's fault. We see it with, and again, it goes back. I want to take a step back here. There's nothing new under the sun here in Washington, D.C., especially when it comes to the establishment's failures. And we saw during the Obama administration the Benghazi debacle that saw those men lose their lives needlessly because of the fecklessness, the politicization, and failures of leadership by Barack Obama, Joe Biden, obviously he was vice president, and Hillary Clinton. This same gang that made decisions that led to the needless loss of lives in Benghazi and a situation they lied about, the support for terrorists in Syria, the rise of ISIS. They're back at it in Afghanistan, and we're seeing the results. So I warned you last week, it's one thing for 20 years of failure, we're all being told, in terms of Afghanistan, and somehow Joe Biden was just left the last man in the game of musical chairs, and he loses. No, he's responsible because there are specific actions that were taken and could have even been taken within the last week to preserve American lives. When I see a Marine commander or Marine general, I think he runs CENTCOM, talking about how they were outsourcing the security of our troops to the Taliban. That's as shocking as anything I've heard from Joe Biden's mouth. And he's facing cognitive difficulties that are really quite apparent to us all. And now we have dead Americans that didn't have to die. And let me be clear. Whoever made a decision to place those troops in the situation they were in is responsible for those deaths. They knew the security was untenable. You can't have force protection while providing the services they were told to provide. Completely crazed, trying to let people come into the airport, separate bad guys from good guys, American citizens from Afghani friends, and Afghanis who weren't friends. Completely untenable. So in order to have force protection and civilian protection, and let me be clear, the civilian loss of life is also on Joe Biden, because he created basically a big fat target for our terrorist adversaries. And he took advantage of it. And they knew it was coming. They were warning. They were expecting an attack. And yet nothing, it looked like, was changed, at least sufficiently, because the proof is in the unfortunate demise of the 13 Americans. So don't be confused. Don't be distracted about ISIS-K versus the Taliban. No, who had a responsibility to make sure this didn't happen and who knew it could have happened and knew what steps needed to be taken to make sure it didn't happen? The President of the United States and all the people around him. And as I said, what's old is new again. In Benghazi, they outsourced security to the local militia. The February 17th Martyrs Brigade Can you imagine an organization named that being tasked with the United States government to provide security? And there were attacks on the compound in Benghazi that were ignored, practically speaking, in terms of following up with necessary security measures. And the language was they were sitting ducks in Benghazi too. And that happened again in Kabul, but the consequences being even worse. Some Republicans are actually talking about impeaching or removing President Biden. Certainly appropriate. There's more than enough reason even before this to impeach him, or to at least begin an impeachment inquiry, given the corruption involving Hunter Biden, his reckless and really purposeful disregard for the law as it relates to securing our border and enforcing our nation's immigration laws, his failure to follow his oath there. Plenty of reasons to impeach him. But do you trust Congress to do the right thing here? I don't. I don't trust the Republican leadership to even say the right thing, let alone do the right thing. So what will happen? Judicial Watch will step in. Judicial Watch has already launched a series of Freedom of Information Act requests to figure out the truth behind what was going on in Afghanistan, because we're not being told the truth. We aren't being told the truth. And we did it with Benghazi, and we're going to do it with Afghanistan, because everything you know about Benghazi, by the way, is because of Judicial Watch, practically speaking. Everything you know about Benghazi in terms of the select committee, there'd be no select committee but for Judicial Watch. The Clinton emails arose as a result of our Benghazi investigations. So we know what to do when Congress doesn't want to do its work. We know what to do when the media doesn't want to do its work. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in Afghanistan or necessarily what should happen. I don't think we should leave Americans behind. I don't think we should have had 4,000 or 5,000 or 6,000 troops in the middle of the Kabul airport being asked to personally screen individuals in a chaotic situation like they were being asked. And this needed to be directly brought forward. And not that I want to be in Afghanistan forever and a day like some people do. But if you're truly committed to leaving and you want to have secure the lives and safety of Americans and others that we have a national interest in securing their lives of, meaning like interpreters and people like that, and you can't do it from the airport because it's unsafe, then you take over the city again. We have the resources to do it, but they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to do that because of the political optics. And I'm sorry, but the military leadership that allowed their troops to be misused and abused and placed in harm's way with obvious risks to them that were borne out in bloody fashion this week, they should be removed as much as the president should be if we're going to be thinking about impeachment. So the folks who gave you Benghazi gave you Afghanistan. And the reason we have this Afghanistan debacle, the loss of human life and the resulting national security disaster and the worst humiliation in American history, is because the deep state and frankly too many people in the Trump administration, including a former Secretary of State who's on the news a lot now, and the Justice Department, refused to do anything about the Benghazi scandal. In fact, they fought us on it. And the courts mocked and ridiculed and blew up the FOIA law to protect Hillary Clinton. It didn't matter if the cover-up involved the loss of human life. It didn't matter if the cover-up law involved the misuse of taxpayer resources to support terrorists in Syria, which was happening in Benghazi. We have the documents. And so why should it surprise us that it's happened again, except 10 times worse? Why should it surprise us? And what does Judicial Watch do? We've put the Freedom of Information Act the Freedom of Information Act investigations. We've launched them, and we're going to sue in court. So we'll have lawsuits, I suspect, before you have any substantial, quote, hearings by the Congress who let this happen. Yeah, and they let it happen. So I could go on and on. I'm sure you're as upset as I am about what happened in Afghanistan and what will continue to happen. Tens of thousands of refugees, who can count? I don't know, because we don't know what the numbers are coming into the United States unvetted, as if we're capable of vetting them. So don't believe the quote vetting would work either way. The large majority aren't, according to the numbers I've seen, aren't citizens coming out of Afghanistan or those with special immigration visas, the SIVs, the sorts of folks that we wanted to help initially. The large majority fall into the general category of folks who just got on the plane, being at the right place at the right time. We don't know. So the refugees are going to be settled in your town. I don't know if literally in your town, but places all over the America. And you'll have to deal with it. Americans will have to deal with it. Joe Biden won't. Secretary of Defense won't. Secretary of State won't. Milley won't. You'll have to deal with the consequences. And I don't trust this administration to bring in one non-US citizen. Not one. This lawless administration run by a man who, as I've said repeatedly, is not up to the task because of age-related cognitive decline. It's quite evident. Maybe there's some other reason for the cognitive decline, but certainly it's there. What a nightmare. But on the other hand, what is it we can do? We can have an impeachment inquiry. We can have leadership talking about the need for an impeachment inquiry, but don't expect that from Republicans. So if you're concerned about it, you need to communicate with your members of Congress about it. And then, of course, you have Judicial Watch to do the separate investigation and get the accountability. Because as I said with Benghazi, if we didn't do the Benghazi investigation, which, by the way, was the most significant non-governmental investigation in American history, the Judicial Watch Benghazi investigation, it led to President Trump. The consequences of it was that President Trump was elected and Hillary Clinton was not. So we're going to do it. And the least we can do is use the tools available to us under the law and the Constitution to try to get accountability for the people who put these Americans in harm's way and whose maladministration, to put it charitably, led to their needless deaths. We should pray for the victims, pray for their families, but we should be motivated to vindicate their sacrifice for us by making sure those who fecklessly put them in harm's way for political purposes, knowing full well they should have known or could have known, they either knew or should have known, reckless disregard, whatever the language you want to use. And people talk about impeaching Biden. That's like one of a half a dozen people who should be removed from office. But we'll do the basic heavy lifting again to figure out the full truth about what went on and do what we can to try to protect the troops that are there by holding this administration accountable. Because I don't think we're going to be, practically speaking, leaving that region anytime soon. And this gang is going to be treating our troops like political playthings, and we can't let that happen. So we'll do what we can in terms of, as a nonpartisan public educational foundation, to both litigate and investigate about what went on in Afghanistan, both yesterday, 2 weeks ago, and what I'm sure is likely to go on weeks from now.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.